My name is Paul Shelley, and welcome to Galactic Historian. This is a series where I talk about all things sci-fi and space lore. Today, I'm going to be doing another list, as you really liked the last one. This list is of famous ships in lore, which have had a profound impact on the verse today. Now, these ships are not going to be in order of importance, simply a list of ships which I believe are crucial for any Star Citizen fan to learn about. This is because of their iconic nature in the lore, or their importance in the events of the verse itself. As always, I couldn't do this without y'all's help and attention, so if you really like this video, remember to hit the like button and subscribe for more content like this. The first ship I'm going to talk about is the one that started humanity to the stars. While the Zeus may get all the glory and acclaim for being the first commercial spaceship with a quantum drive, this ship is the first true starship of humanity, the RSI X-7. The X-7 was an experimental single-seater spaceship developed by RSI with some aid from RSI scientist and engineer Nick Croshaw. Mr. Croshaw had been studying the Neso Triangle, a space near Neptune's moon of Neso, where an unusual number of ships were disappearing without a trace. Eventually, he discovered that the ships with specific malfunctions in their quantum drives were causing a hyperstable wormhole in the area to open up and pull those ships in. Once he discovered a safe means of modifying a quantum drive to emit similar signals, he could open the wormhole with relative ease. However, these modifications required a specialized ship to be built, a tough, rugged, and dependable ship which would be maneuverable enough to ride the currents of interspace. The result was the first jump-capable starship, the RSI X-7. On April 10, 2271, Nick Croshaw made the ship's first test flight, flying the ship through the wormhole into a brand new system and returning safely, thus landing the X-7 into the history books, and landing the system with the name Croshaw. However, his historical ship isn't just famous for being the first jump craft, but because of the legacy of the design that is left on RSI itself. The ship became the standard blueprint for single-person, small, jump-capable starships. And though the design has morphed over the years, the modern RSI Aurora is the latest in the long line of X-7 descendants, likely keeping much of the aesthetic of the original jumper ship. Next on this list is a ship we've talked about before on this channel, one that has fundamentally changed how humanity views artificial intelligence, and may be the main reason why there is such technological stagnation in the UEE, the Artemis. The Artemis was an experimental RSI chariot, modified to be an interstellar colony ship, likely the first of its kind. The ship was built to house 5,000 people in stasis couches, and keep food and equipment fresh for the hundreds of years the ship would need to reach a nearby star system. This ambitious goal would not have been possible without the development of the ship's own AI system named Janus, which was one of, if not the most advanced AIs humanity had ever built. The ship would be sent off into deep space with its new crew in hibernation in 2232. We know the ship managed to leave the solar system, but shortly afterwards, all communications was lost, and the ship was never heard from again. This came after a series of AI failures which cost the lives of millions of people over the 200 years of experimentation. With the most advanced ship ever built being lost, with an AI on board and in control, people were quick to blame Janus for the loss, and as a result, nearly all AI research was banned from then onwards. Making matters worse, when Nick Croshaw found and flew the first jump point 40 years later, he proved there was no need for long stasis couch journeys to the stars, and thus no necessity for an AI to keep humans alive and ships on track for long voyages. Experiments into AI continued into the coming years, though mostly in secret and always leading in tragedy. As a result, AI research is still banned and very contentious in the modern UEE, all because of one ship that disappeared in deep space. This next ship is one that has convinced me that it must be a requirement that all UEE admirals flunk physics in order to get the job, the UES Olympus. This was a UEE carrier of a currently unknown design, It was the flagship of a UEE Rear Admiral who was chasing a band of criminals in the Null system in 2571, shortly after the end of the First Tavaran War. The bandits made for the atmosphere of Null 5, also known as Ashana, and while the ship's combat air patrol of 4 Stiletto light fighters was in hot pursuit, the Admiral wanted to kill personally and ordered the Olympus to descend into the atmosphere to continue the chase. This was a terrible decision, however, as the massive carrier was soon dragged down to the planet, unable to escape the high gravity. As the crew abandoned the literal sinking ship, 2 additional stilettos were launched to cover the escape. The cap of the Olympus fought valiantly against the outlaws, who had sensed the change in fortune and descended onto the mortally wounded carrier. The recovered black box revealed that those 6 pilots who fought on managed an astounding 37 kills during the engagement. This is important because, at the time, UEE naval doctrine was heavily reliant on medium and heavy fighters, with light fighters being relegated to recon missions and light escort duty. These light fighters were often called parasite ships and were literally tubes with engines, weapon mounts, and a cockpit, effectively equivalent to a 21st century space capsule with weapons attached to it. So the fact that these rocket fighters managed to take down a significant number of attackers while flying ships which were not designed to fight in atmosphere was a turning point in the perspective of the role of the light fighter. While none of the crew would escape the fall of the Olympus, and the 6 pilots would eventually be brought down by the attacking outlaws, the recording of their valiant last stand was propagandized to help sell the public on the latest light fighter to replace the Stiletto, the Aegis Gladius. The Gladius was a quantum leap in development and quickly became iconic for its role in fighting the Second Tavaran War and the Vandal raids. While it's aging now, its success led to a light fighter revolution currently going on in the mid-30th century. All of this because of the last stand of the Olympus cap, proving the viability of the concept. The Olympus itself also managed to put its mark in history. The ship would go down mostly intact. The hull would soon become a city for the outlaws of the system, and would come to house a large number of Tavaran who were fleeing their homeworld after the war. This would lead to the Olympus hosting a famous Tavaran marketplace, and the leader of the city, the de facto leader of the system itself, a Tavaran pirate lord, who has even managed to fight back a Vandal invasion with the scattered pirate fleets of the system. The Olympus is a stunning sight to see, and the home of millions of people who live outside the protection of the UEE, a wrecked ship that has become the centerpiece of a outlaw nation. The 4th ship on this list is a more generic entry, but one equally as important, and holds the distinction of the only ship on this list which you can fly in-game right now, the Case Aerospace Hurricane. Case Aerospace was founded by Leonard Case, a former RSI engineer who grew tired of the corporate interference and red tape of RSI, and thus founded his own aerospace company. While his first original ship, the space yacht called the Cosmos Sloop, did relatively well, the outbreak of the Second Tavaran War caused sales to slump, and materials became hard to find. As such, they pivoted towards a role requested by the UEE Navy, a heavy fighter to counter the new improved technology of the Tavaran and their ships. For inspiration, Case turned to the Tavaran Jackal, a 2-seater Tavaran ship famous for being able to survive engagements due to its dedicated Rio seat operator who focused on keeping the ship's shields angled just right to deflect incoming fire. He inverted the role from the defensive second seat to an offensive one, slapping 4 powerful size 3 guns for a turret operator while the pilot made sure to line up good shots. While it did enter service towards the end of the Second Tavaran War, it still made a major impression, performing well against the Tavaran phalanx shield tech and strategy. The Mezzer government was so impressed that after the war they worked with Case to develop a replacement for the now aging Perseus gunship. But a ship accident would kill Leonard Case before he could start the design, and this would lead to the company's downfall. Why the Hurricane is so important, beyond its role in ending the Second Tavaran War, is that a young engineer in the mid-28th century would rediscover the designs of Leonard Case and be inspired to continue his legacy. That engineer was the founder of Anvil Aerospace, J. Harris Arnold. The Hurricane became the blueprint for Anvil to design from, inspiring the Terrapin, Hornet, Gladiator, Pisces, Carrack, Hawk, and Arrow. Without the Hurricane, there would be no Anvil. Lastly, I want to talk about the most terrifying ship on this list, a ship that has helped us understand the Vanduul better than anything else in our history thus far. A Vanduul kingship called the X-12. We don't know a lot about the kingship. Well, not as much as we know about most of the other ships on this list. We do know that it serves as a flagship for Vanduul hordes, alliances of various clans or hordes that fight together for a singular cause. We also know that it's quite rare, possibly being a status symbol of the largest hordes to prove their power over the smaller ones. The first Vanduul kingship to be confirmed was late in the battle for Orion. Various Vanduul raids had been occurring in the system since 2681, prompting a UEE fleet to be permanently stationed there. However, on February 16, 2712, a massive Vanduul fleet emerged into the system. Unfortunately, the main carrier of the UEE fleet had been called away to put down an uprising, so the diminished fleet had to rely on local militia and private military companies who were stationed in Orion to help fight back the attack. They almost succeeded when, on the third day, a kingship arrived. The ship single-handedly destroyed 3 destroyers and several frigates in moments, breaking the back of the UEE fleet and forcing the survivors to flee. Ever since, kingships would only arrive in a conflict between the UEE and the Vanduul at the optimal moment, breaking the backs of the exhausted naval vessels and shattering any UEE resistance. We know a lot about these ships thanks to one that was captured by the UEE. Codenamed X-12, this ship managed to fall into the hands of the UEE by dumb luck. You see, the Vanduul always blow up their ships if they believe they're about to be overtaken, resulting in an almost no intact Vanduul craft ever being captured. The reason the X-12 hadn't met a similar fate was because of an engine malfunction, which flooded the ship with radiation and killed the majority of the crew. The UEE found it floating adrift in the Garin system and sent a detachment of the 8th Marine Division to capture the vessel, which they did with relative ease. What the UEE has learned from the X-12 has been vital to understanding the Vanduul. The size and capacity of a kingship is massive, over double the size of a Bengal carrier, with weapons and squadrons of fighters that dwarf the largest ships in the UEE. The Marines also managed to capture over 100 intact Vanduul scythes, which were sold off or brought to research labs for further study. The UEE learned a lot about the structure of their society from the ship as well. While it was first believed that the Vanduul lived in nomadic, familial clan structures, the diversity of the genetics found on the ship indicate a more horde or alliance structure. There were also only males of the species present, indicating that these fleets were purely designed for raiding and war, with the possibility of females and young being present on distant planets or fleets inside Vanduul space. Lastly, we learned that the Vanduul worship knives. There is knife iconography everywhere, including a room thought to be a worship space where knives were pictured in artistic stained glass. The study of the X-12 prompted the development of Project Quadrine, a massive super dreadnought built by just about every manufacturer in the UEE. The fruit of Project Quadrine was the UEES Retribution, designed from its inception as a kingship slayer. So those were the 5 ships I think are essential to learn about from the lore. I'd like to thank you for watching, and I would like to thank those on screen now who supported me on Patreon to keep this content going. I'm currently trying to raise enough to hire an editor who can help me increase the quality and quantity of these videos coming as well. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, then think about becoming a subscriber yourself. For now, let me know what you think in the comments below. Would you like me to do another one of these videos? What lore ships would you like to learn more about? As always, remember, ex historia ad astra.